I'm Seth Clevenger, Managing Editor of Features at Transport Topics. I'm speaking with Peter Covach, who's the Director of Information Technology at Paper Transport, a dry van truckload carrier based in De Pere, Wisconsin, operating a fleet of 730 trucks. So Pete, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day.
All right, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Pete, one of the big emerging trends we've seen in trucking technology in recent years has been the use of predictive analytics. Using data not just to see what has happened in the past, but to also try to use this to predict what's likely to happen in the future. And Paper Transport is actually a really good example of this with some of the work you've been doing on forward-looking ETAs for more precise estimates on arrival time. So Pete, could you go ahead and give us a little bit of an example and an overview of exactly what you're doing in this area at Paper Transport?
For sure. And for me, what I have as a litmus test is predictive analytics being taking the data that you have accumulated, manipulating that, and then making those projections forward. And the big differentiator for that is so that way, as you execute more and more, as you have more and more data build up, those trends, those predictions become even better as that data builds. So, what we have done is taken that minute-by-minute GPS information, which everybody gets, and build out individual route lines for all of our drivers, and then combine all of that, aggregate all of that, and now we start understanding what is going to be the average for those drivers as to how long it's going to take to actually execute. And again, as we execute more and more of those routes, that information gets tighter and tighter.
Okay. And obviously this will help tremendously with planning, right? So when you're looking at your network, looking at opportunities to pick up loads, this puts you in a position where you can make much better decisions, right?
For sure. And at the simplest level, you have that feedback loop between the driver and the driver manager. We take that information and provide that same level of information that the driver manager is seeing all the way back to the driver. So, at the simplest sense, we have that conversation going on and setting those expectations as to what can actually be done. It's great that we have this projected ETA, but at the end of the day, we need that conversation and a unified understanding as to what will be executed. So that way the appointment times are set appropriately and that our customers are communicated with appropriately.
Sure. And you think, in the modern trucking industry, forward visibility, I get the sense, is just becoming more and more important. You guys are staying ahead of the curve on that. But what are you hearing from your shippers? What do you think, is out there in terms of shipper expectations for knowing, precise times, when a truck's going to arrive, and just knowing exactly where their freight is?
Yeah. At this point, the shipper's mindset is that transparency. Wanting that full picture, that full detailed view as to what's actually happening with the load. And we've seen that with the visibility tools that have been coming onto the market, 4Kites or 10-4, where the shippers want that aggregated information coming in from the carriers. At this point, we're already providing GPS information every 10 to 15 minutes coming into their system, so that way they see exactly where that truck's at. And then with that, providing those regularly updated ETAs back into the system as well has been kind of a new development for us.
Okay.
So having those updated projections being not only shown to our drivers, our driver managers, but ultimately to our shippers and finally their customers.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, it's everybody's expecting that same consumer experience in the transportation world.
All right. Yeah, and with these forward-looking ETAs, this is something that Paper Transport is developing on a proprietary basis. So you guys are investing in this. You see a real need for this as a competitive advantage. Why is this such an important technology for you guys to pursue? Why invest so much into this IT foundation for your business?
And that's truly what it is for us, and how we viewed it as a foundational piece of data that we needed to understand. We knew where our drivers, were going from, Wisconsin to Ohio, but we had no idea where the drivers will be. Show me all the drivers in Chicago at 11 a.m. tomorrow, right? We needed to understand where will we be at every point in the day moving forward as we plan it out. So not only will that give us visibility into empties along the route line or maintenance facilities that they can drop by, but then we have that hours of service understanding with it to say, that's great that they're moving past it, but do they actually have the time to stop? So combining all that information so that way all of our business units, all of our departments can really work together and have that single view as to what will be happening with that driver.
Okay. Well, great. Maybe can you give me any, before we leave this topic, what might be the next step for you guys in this relatively recent rollout of forward-looking ETAs? What's the opportunity for growth? What's the opportunity to expand on that in the future that you're looking at?
I mean, ultimately, what our long-term jump into is now we know where the drivers will be and where our holes in our network will be. We really want to start plugging in those holes and having to say we need a load from A to B right during this time frame, and that's really where we want to go with that in an automated means.
Okay, great. Well, I wanted to shift gears here a little bit, Pete, and talk about another hot topic in the industry, and this is looking a little bit further down the line, I think, but there's certainly been a growing level of interest in blockchain technology and how that might be applied in the trucking industry. And Paper Transport is a member of the Blockchain and Transport Alliance. So I wanted to ask you, what do you see as the potential for blockchain in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest advantage to blockchain is the fact that it takes out any sort of middleman. That's really the foundational idea behind it, is that you have parties that normally would not have communicated with each other, directly communicating and sharing that information. So I think that's why blockchain has become so interesting to a lot of individuals, because current state, just with how many carriers are out in the market, it just created this need to have a lot of third parties involved in order to keep trusted transactions flowing.
Sure. And with a blockchain setup, in theory, you could have, multiple carriers, multiple shippers, all kind of communicating together in kind of a load board environment, right?
And ultimately, that's where we would love to be, right? Is if the shippers were all contributing their loads directly onto a blockchain. The carriers could all retrieve those loads and accept those loads right within the blockchain. You don't have these phantom loads on these 100 different load boards anymore. When you actually accept it, everybody sees the loads accepted and it's done. And again, going back to where we had with the ETAs, is if we can pluck those loads directly off this blockchain and have it integrate directly into our network, that ultimately we believe will make us the most efficient that we can be.
Okay. Yeah, and could you speak a little bit more about this common thread with blockchain? A lot of the folks who really study it say that it could really mean a lot for trust between business partners. Today, of course, it's companies that know other companies and have this built-up trust. With blockchain and some of the safeguards of the system, there's some thought that maybe you can trust the system more than just people, and you can see this permanent history of work that's been done in the past, so you can feel confident in who you're working with. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that's blockchain could have the potential to change how trust works essentially in the trucking industry?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you have a large amount of small carriers, that trust is especially important, right? It's nobody's wondering if Schneider's going to show up on time or the large carriers are going to show up on time, right? They have that reputation out in the industry. So it's this small to mid-sized carriers that are really going to take advantage of this new trust model because it's a proven track record of what they have executed. And other parties that normally, again, would not have communicated are validating and saying, yes, this happened, this is a good transaction.
Okay. So we see this potential, and this is very intriguing, and we're very interested in seeing how this might develop, but just how long might this take? I mean, do you think this is something that's years away, and what will it take to, for the industry to actually put something like this in place? and actually have enough people on board to make it worthwhile?
There's a lot of investment happening in the technology itself, so that the technology is not going to be the lag as far as when it will be become mainstream. It's really going to become the parties involved in the technology actually coming together and building out that network and agreeing as to how it's going to operate. Again, the biggest piece of it is that now you have to have shippers that normally wouldn't talk to each other and carriers that normally wouldn't talk to each other actually agree on a standard,
right,
and implement it. Not only agree, but implement it into their systems. If that were to happen, though, it would be a very different world and it would change very fast.
Yeah, and would you say that we're still kind of in that discussion phase right now, kind of the exploratory phase where the people who might someday participate in blockchain networks are kind of just exploring it?
For sure, we're in the super hype phase where it's
right.
Blockchain's going to cut your bread and bake your cookies too. So. Yeah.
Well, we'll see how it all develops. I mean, it's I think we're the industry now is kind of wrapping its mind around it, and hopefully we have some great conversations and discussions through the Blockchain and Trucking Alliance and Transport Alliance, I should say, and others in the future, and we'll see how this all develops. Pete, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time, but I think this is a good place to wrap things up. So I'd like to thank you again for sharing your insights, and best of luck with your future technology initiatives at Paper Transport.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Bet.